In the last lecture, we took a look at loops and arrays, so we're starting to explore further aspects of the JavaScript language. In this lecture, we're going to look further into objects, and objects can be useful both as we need them for our APIs and the usage of the JavaScript language, as well as we need to create our own data or work with our own data in JavaScript. Objects give us the ability to organize our code a little bit more effectively. And we'll explore how we can use these and how we can write code to support objects in this lecture. So far we've seen regular variables, we've seen strings, we've seen numbers, we've seen booleans, and in JavaScript all of these things operate a bit like objects, but we've also seen arrays which allow us to handle data grouped together, and we can also treat those somewhat like objects. Objects in JavaScript will allow us to structure our variables in a way that makes sense to programmers and allows us to model data that puts behaviors and properties closer together. So objects have properties and they have methods in JavaScript. Properties are the data or the attributes that are associated with a particular thing, and methods are sort of its actions or behaviors that it can perform. So if we think about objects, many of you are probably familiar with objects, but we can take something that is a real-world concept and then we can model it as an object. And so a bank account might have a property for a balance, it might have a property for an owner, it might have several other properties like an account number, etc. And it might also have methods, so you could have a withdraw method, a deposit method, similar methods like this. And something like a bicycle may have a color, a height, a style. There's a whole variety of attributes associated with the bicycle, whereas the methods may be brake, change gear. You might model a lot of different things in a bicycle. So this is a way to start thinking about associating these behaviors and data together into a single variable, a single concept in your code. Now, you can create objects, and there are a lot of different ways to do that in JavaScript. JavaScript has actually proliferated a lot of ways that you can create objects. One of them that you can do is you can just create new object, and this is probably less common nowadays. You don't see new object as frequently, though it is still something that is possible for creating a new object. It's more common to see this curly brace notation now. So let bike equal open and close curly braces. This will allow you to create a new object, and from there you can start doing new things with the object. The other thing that you can do, since functions are objects, it's common in JavaScript to create a function for a particular object and then use the keyword new to construct a new version of that particular object. So we'll get into that approach as well as in a few slides and how we can actually do things with that. So here you can see three different major ways of constructing objects, and we're even going to get into more ways of specifying them. So objects in JavaScript are extremely dynamic, so we can just add properties to objects as we like. You can use dot and then the property name, and in fact you can even do things that are sort of illegal variable names here by enclosing that in brackets and using a string. But that is also pretty less common. I think that you often see legal variable names as your properties in JavaScript because it makes several things much easier in the language. So here we can create a new object, and then we can, in this case we're going to have a bike, and we're going to set its color property to blue and its height property to 26. And in the second example, we're going to create a new bank account object, and we're going to set its balance to $3,221.12. We're going to set its name to the string savings. Now, it's also possible to use what we call JavaScript object notation, sometimes referred to as JSON, when we construct objects. And you can see at the bottom of the page we have bike equals an object with a property color of blue and a property color or property height that is 26. So this is approximately equivalent to what you're getting in this first example, and the second line at the bottom is approximately equivalent to what you're getting in the second example. They're kind of accomplishing the same things. Now, this allows you to kind of create throwaway objects, and since JavaScript is pretty loose with objects, that is often adequate for what you need. There's also a class syntax that's been introduced more recently in JavaScript, and this allows you to provide a more specific structure for your classes. So you can, and this is useful if you're going to be writing larger applications that need to have some centralized or very specific definition of classes. So you can create a constructor, and you can use the this keyword to associate those values with as properties in the class or in the object. You can also use getters and setters, and you can declare your own methods this way as well. But it is much more common to just create throwaway objects in JavaScript. That's probably building objects on the fly is something that you see more frequently in the language. Now, this special function is a constructor, and you can use this to build the object and set its values. In Python, if you remember, we had an init special method. In JavaScript, we actually use an actual constructor. And you can provide parameters to your constructor, and you can use that this keyword to identify what they're going to do. So, as I said, you can use this class notation. You can also just declare a function that is going to set its own properties. And that's another way to create a more structured class or a more structured object by defining it as a function and then instantiating it later. But you can see here in both of these examples, we're now going to be creating objects that have properties. On the left, it's going to be color and height. That's going to allow us to instantiate new bike objects. And on the right, it's going to be balance and owner. Those are going to be our properties. You can also define methods for objects, and again, there are several different ways to do this. In the first example at the top, we can define a withdraw function. So bank account.withdraw is just going to be a function, and it's going to have a parameter of amount, and you can see how we're implementing the body of that function. So we can define functions on the fly like this, and we can assign a variable to a function, and then we can give it a different name. And you can see with the JavaScript object notation, we can do that as well. It works pretty similarly, but now we're using colons instead of equal signs. So you can see here, let bank account equal, and then we're defining properties, and we're defining that method. And you can, either way you do this, it's going to work about the same in practice. We can access the properties, we can output values from that, we can execute our methods. It's going to work, both of these are going to do the same thing. You can also define the methods in your constructor, which is kind of strange because in JavaScript you can declare a function and then you can have a function defined inside of that function, and you can do this using the class, the class notation as well. But I think that JavaScript does provide you a lot of different ways to do the same thing because the language has evolved quite a bit in the last 25 years or so. So here's one example of an object using a function approach. So we can declare we can define an object that is a person that has a first name and a last name, and you can see we're defining properties, and we are also defining methods here. So first name and last name are properties. Get full name and get greeting are both methods that we're defining, and you can see how that will operate. We can also have a pet function that is going to have a name and age property, and then a toString method, so you can see how that will actually operate as well. And then there's some execution of the instance of operator, so you can check the results of this one in the JS fiddle that should be linked in the notes. Now, finally, we also have access to dates in JavaScript. Dates are built into the language, so we can just create a new date, and dates will allow us to represent calendar dates. And you can instantiate these just as the current time. If you create a new date, it will be right now. You can also instantiate them with particular parameters. So your years are going to be your literal years. Your months are going to start with 0, and then your days are your day of the month is going to start with 1, which is a little confusing. I don't know why so many languages do it this way, but it seems to be a trend. Months seem to start with 0, and then days of the month tend to start with 1. But you can instantiate these. In JavaScript, you can instantiate days with nothing. You can instantiate with day, month, year, or I'm sorry, year, month, day, and you can also instantiate with hours, minutes. You can continue to add those values so that you can define more and more precise dates. So some common methods you'll see in dates: get full year, get month, get date. These are going to return exactly as you would think. Full year is going to be your 4-digit year. Get hours, get minutes, get seconds. These are going to return the hour of the day, the minutes of the hour, and the seconds of the minute. And then there is a toString, which is going to be a much longer string that is not terribly useful in practice. And JavaScript doesn't have the greatest built-in formatting for dates, so you tend to have to do some of this work manually, or use another package, or use another function to format your dates effectively. There are a few different methods you can use, like toLocalString, to format dates, but it's a little obtuse, so it doesn't work quite as seamlessly as many other languages with dates. You can manipulate dates, so you can set date, which will set the day of the month. You can set month, you can set hours. So date objects can be manipulated in this way. So you can change the different attributes of the date itself, and that will actually allow you to modify these as necessary. And you can see here, even if you go beyond the legal number of days in a month, in this case we're going to have Halloween 2021. If we add one day to that, then we actually end up on November 1st. So it doesn't do any, it protects you from doing weird things with your dates. Now, finally, in JavaScript, we didn't have maps for a very long time. So often what people would do with JavaScript is they would use an object as a map. And if you look at this, it actually kind of works the way you would expect. It's very similar to a Python dictionary. So we can create, in this example, we would create a states object, and that would have properties New York, NY, NJ, IA, and PA, and you can see the values for each of these, and we can set those values very similarly to a Python dictionary. And this was not terribly uncommon. For a long time we had the in keyword that you could use to identify if a property was defined, and you can use a for in loop to iterate through each one of these values, and that would work. But now, recently in the last, I think it's been a while now, 7-8 years, they introduced the idea of a map, and now there have probably been enough JavaScript versions and enough browser versions and enough support for this that I would say it's pretty safe to use these. So you can declare a variable and instantiate a map, and this is going to be a little bit more of an efficient implementation for what you might typically use a map for. So the set get methods are going to be how you interact with a map, but this is probably a better solution as opposed to just using objects as maps, as an associative array. So this probably is going to be a little bit better for what you need as opposed to just a plain object. This is going to match the performance of maybe a hash table or a dictionary a little bit more effectively. So hopefully that will give you some understanding of the different constructs that you can use in JavaScript as objects. We're going to continue to explore the language a little bit further. This will give you a basic overview of the language, but a lot of what we're going to use JavaScript for is going to be working with the browser, and we're going to get into that in our next lecture. Thank you for watching.